Now, here's Vicki McKenna.
Hey, welcome back to the program. Duke Pesta made the long drive from Oshkosh here to Madison today. Duke Pesta, who's been on the show by phone before from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. We're usually talking about the appalling culture on campus, where this sort of, bizarre left think comes from. Well, today we're going to talk with Duke about Common Core, because in addition to being a professor of English literature, he is also working with a group called the Freedom Project Education, freedomprojecteducation.org. And you guys are a group that is fighting Common Core both here in Wisconsin and nationally. And we're going to talk about, since we just talked about porn teacher in Middleton, we're going to talk about maybe where this stuff comes from. And you've got a unique perspective, Duke, because you know the academic culture from where it comes. But you also now are, I think, one of the only people talking about the core sexuality standards, according to the Common Core standards that now kindergartners, first graders, second graders are going to have to deal with. It's great to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Vicki, so much for having me today.
So before we get into the national sexuality standards, they are national sexuality standards, core standards, K-12. I got the document sitting in front of me. United States Department of Health and Human Services, the National Education Association, Department of Education involved in this. Let's go back to this teacher. They come out of schools of education. Where does this culture that Matt Kittle and I were talking about, where all these teachers seem to be perfectly comfortable in thinking that it was okay to surf porn that was so graphic, you would probably have to pay a lot of money normally to see it. Where does it come from? Because this is a culture problem, I think, as much as anything.
Well, I think it ultimately comes down to the fact that if you're going to mainstream previously unmainstreamed sexual behaviors, you cannot then have any boundaries. That if you're going to argue that all sorts of what used to be known as perverse or odd or strange kinds of deviant sex, if all those now are normal, how do you discriminate on the basis of age? How do you discriminate on the basis of what somebody's watching? So the left has itself in a bit of a pickle. They can't have boundaries or standards, because if they do, then inevitably those standards can creep, and people can argue, well, why are you tolerating one and not the other? So there has been kind of a sexual anarchy at play here, that in order to advance the agenda sexually, they have to really waive all standards and barriers, and you're beginning to see that here.
And indeed, when we get into the national sexuality standards, we will talk exactly explain what you're talking about. On campus, on college campuses, you can actually take classes in hardcore pornography.
Sure, there are a number of campuses across the country where you can take credit in pornography, and they try to jazz it up a little bit. So you'll be watching hardcore XXX porno movies, but you'll look at them from a feminist slant. Do feminist directors emphasize
porn?
Yes. Do they notice how the camera angles are different and the music is different?
So it's art. If it's hardcore porn, is art. If you put the word femme before it,
it becomes a gender studies thing, right? So we completely ignore the goodness or the badness, the morality or the immorality of pornography, and we focus on who's doing it, right? So in other words, women doing porn is empowering in a world where men have previously done it. So the whole moral thing gets elided, and it becomes simply a study in politics.
Wow. Wow. Actually, that's what ultimately these national sexuality standards is political. In the end, they become political. And I don't mean political Democrat versus Republican. I mean political in the small p sense of the word. All right, so these are national sexuality standards, core standards, K-12, United States Department of Education, United States Department of Health and Human Services, overseen by the NEA. I'm looking at kindergarten sexuality standards, and their Common Core affiliated sexuality standards. And in fact, that is not only in the actual document put out by the government, it is also already understood by administrations. There was a case of a poster being put up, and I believe it was a 5th or a 6th grade middle school class in Kansas that had very, very distressing things on it. We'll get to that in a sec. The principal said that the curriculum is part of, it aligns with national standards around those topics and is part of our curriculum in the school district. And this was, how do people express sexual feelings? 5th, 6th graders. Oral sex, sexual fantasy, anal sex, masturbation, cuddling on the couch. 5th, 6th grade. And the principal admitted this was part of Common Core.
So yeah, think about it. There's a big poster in this middle school classroom. It's right up there alongside Clifford the Big Red Dog and the ABCs. Middle school kids are sitting in class and they're learning, and this poster's staring them in the face. And the title of the poster is, How Do People Express Their Sexual Feelings? You've got kissing and caressing with all that vulgar list of things. And so when a middle school kid took
kissing is exactly the same.
Dancing.
Is in dancing, and holding hands is on this list too. As grinding is on the list, as anal sex. I mean, I don't mean to be gross, but they've now taken affection and affectionate behavior and equated it with deviance in some cases.
You see the moral relativity here, right? That there's not a single thing that distinguishes any of these behaviors.
No.
I would think from a simple leftist perspective, from a simple Dem left perspective, wouldn't you want to separate out the things that might be potentially disease transmitting, right? From things like holding hands or dancing? And yet it shows you just how extreme the sexuality standards are. Because on this list, there is no distinction made.
None.
These are all perfectly legitimate. They've been completely mainstreamed.
Right. Everything on this list is considered legitimate.
Yep.
For 5th graders to understand everything's equal, how to express, quote, sexual feelings. And depending on how any of these things are done, they can crest into the realm of deviance. Sure. They really can. All right, that's 5th, 6th grade. Kindergarten. Duke, I'm looking at these standards for kindergarten, and what it's about defining sex as a construct, defining gender for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd graders as a construct.
Yep, and the thing to step back for just a quick second, these national sexuality standards, which have been written, you can get them online, they break up sexuality education into groups of triads, 3-year periods, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade. Those 3 grades have to meet a standard, 4th, 5th, 6th, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're right. They start with kids as young as 5 years old, and they are asking kids to learn things that are utterly developmentally inappropriate for kids that age. So, for instance, in kindergarten, for the 5th, 6th, and 7th graders, they have to define, show ways to demonstrate respect for different kinds of families. So, in other words, you got a 5, 6, or 7-year-old who has to argue for ways that all families are equal. They come from a home that teaches biblical Christianity or morality. They come from an environment where...
And they're cognitively 5, 6, and 7 years old.
How do they process this? How do you process this at that age? So what they're doing is the federal government has now decided that it and it alone has the definitive authority on what sex is. And so we're setting
and
up...
what gender is.
And what gender is.
And what family is and what everything else is.
We're setting up a huge conflict between what your parents teach and what gets taught. I said this on your earlier program too, that one of the great problems we have is that what's going to happen? What's going to happen when all the liberals out there need to wake up as well? Are you comfortable with the federal government determining what are legitimate answers to sex, to attraction, to gender? Because if you're okay with that now, are you going to be okay with it later when somebody else runs the show and they may have a very different idea?
Exactly, but that is not right now. They figure that the educrats, the leftist educrats, control education, and so they think that it's going to be a-okay. So I'm looking at standards for K2, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd graders under identity, sexual identity. Now imagine your 5-year-old, your kindergartner, all right, will be asked to provide examples of how friends, family, media, society, and culture influence ways boys and girls think they should act. That is a question that seems to me to be a question that's almost a college level question. I mean, that's looking at how, different things affect perceptions of gender. This is telling kids, number one, that gender is something that is about perception and only perception. And secondly, telling them to look up examples and come up with examples on a concept that right now at 5, 6, and 7, they think I'm a boy, you're a girl. That's it.
I wouldn't assign an assignment that vague and broad to freshmen in college. You're gonna actually entrust 5, 6, and 7-year-olds to go to the internet and search for things like gender or sex or culture. It's staggering to think that this is, but yet we know, right? The answer is that any media search that there is going to be one that the government provides.
Right.
So the schools will provide the way they're supposed to research this.
Well, and that's probably the framework part of this that people don't understand. I mean, they may be offended by the base of what we're talking about, but this thing has tentacles going out and coming back.
Well, and that's important you brought that up, believe it or not. You got to something that a lot of people don't understand. Not only are these explicit standards, they are also standards that are meant to be infused in all of the other subject matters. So this is we'll talk about hiring sexuality teachers and things like that, but Duke, you were telling me this morning, this is supposed to be in English literature, it's supposed to be or English language arts, science, social science, mathematics, that these sexuality standards are supposed to be infused throughout the entire curriculum.
Well, think about it. They don't have health class for 5-year-olds. They're not going to create a health class for 5-year-olds. The only way these standards can be met is if they become a part of every single existing curriculum. If you get this document online and look at page 6, it explicitly tells you on page 6 of the document that these sexuality standards have been cross-referenced with English and language arts and math standards already in place in Common Core. So you're not going to in any way, shape, or form have kids pulled out of class and dumped in health class. These are going to be in every math and history and science, every class. And what you pointed out is exactly right. What's so insidious about these, at least math and English are actual standards you can look at and fight back against. These standards were never meant to be rolled out as, okay, look, everybody.
We're going to take our sexual identity test today.
Exactly. This will never be on anybody's formal radar because it's written, it's there, and all they're going to do is fold it into existing curriculum so you don't have an actual target to fight against. You're going to have to fight against the math and English standards because they're going to become so intertwined with the sexuality. It's one of the reasons why, for anybody who's been paying attention to Common Core, we've been talking for weeks and months now about why are so many of these Common Core exemplar texts so highly sexualized? Why are they reading things like The Bluest Eye in 9th grade? Well, now you know, because they're already beginning to conform to this curriculum that's on nobody's radar.
You know, and here's 6th grade. Analyze external influences that have an impact on one's attitude about gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. This is about saying there are no differences here. This is about reducing people to sameness, to collective sameness. In fact, you go through this, it doesn't matter if you're looking at 12th grade, it doesn't matter if you're looking at kindergarten. It's about creating the idea that everybody is there's no individuality, there's no real difference. There's not only no real difference in families, there's no reason for morality. If there's no difference, then there's no reason for the morality that values certain types of arrangements or certain types of behavior over another type of behavior.
You know, as we hash this out, something that just ran through my mind is that every single aspect of Common Core curriculum subordinates subject matter to sociology, right? The idea that there is no right answer in math, the idea that we're getting rid of literature in terms of informational texts, the entire premise of Common Core and these sexuality standards, it really is the triumph of sociology and particularly politically tendentious sociology at the expense of any core knowledge. And that's what liberal educrats have been doing in universities for years. Now you're beginning to see the feedback even in kindergarten.
Now even in kindergarten. So, and then going back to that 6th grade example on how do people express their sexual feelings. This gets to the idea of this sort of collective sameness that we're talking about here, that nothing is different. There is no moral value of one behavior or another. There's no scale. I mean, what you're looking at is behaviors that are scaled behaviors. Hugging is different than kissing. Kissing is different than vaginal intercourse.
Well,
you know what I mean? I mean, these are scaled behaviors.
Well, and think about this.
And they don't scale them.
A little boy hugs a girl, he's going to get in a lot of trouble. But the implication is that if kids but we're enabling kids to do some of the more graphic things. We're encouraging and enabling them to do some of the more graphic things on the list. It really is shocking. And you see this across the board with this kind of mindset. And the thing that's so frustrating, Vicki, is that in trying to remove any moral judgment from this and make them all equal, of course, our liberal educators have made a moral judgment, haven't they?
Of course they have, but postmodern says only postmodernists are actually true.
That's right.
And right.
That's
and
right.
Just and moral, I guess.
Yep.
Remember, Duke and I have talked about postmodernism here, which is there is no such thing as truth except the postmodernist truth.
Right.
Of the truth of the moment.
Right.
And when I say there's absolutely no truth, of course, we accept my ability to say absolutely not. Right?
Exactly.
I can say absolutely, nobody else can.
All right. So, again, remember, and this was a quote from spokeswoman Leanne Neal from Hawker Grove Middle School in Shawnee, Kansas, about this poster that's a Common Core-oriented poster. about how people express their sexual feelings in 6th grade. The poster that you reference is actually part of our middle school health and science materials. Science materials, Middleton parents. I just want you to remember that what we're talking about here could be taught by Andrew Harris in the future. And so it is part of our district-approved curriculum. The curriculum is part of and aligns with national standards around those topics. I thought we didn't have national standards. I thought this was not about national standards. They say it's all states choosing to do this, Duke. It is part of the national standards around those topics and part of our curriculum. I thought it had nothing to do with curriculum in the school district. And that is what the proponents of Common Core continually say. This is not national. This is grassroots-oriented, state-run efforts, and it has nothing to do with curriculum.
And notice the difference. Up until very recently, when things like this happened, you'd get the hasty apology from the school saying that we didn't mean to offend anybody. We'll take it down. Notice what's happened now in the year that we've had Common Core. Now the argument is that these are the standards. You just have to deal with them.
Exactly, because in the case of this middle school in Shawnee, Kansas, it was a father objecting to his daughter being exposed to this material. This was the father taking his case to the principal, to the superintendent, and they basically said, nothing we can do about it. They're national standards, which is exactly what we've said would happen with Common Core, and it is happening. All right, Duke Pesta, Brian Schimming in my studio. We'll also tell you guys, in fact, I'll tell you right now how to get to the sexuality standards. If you go to FPEUSA.org. Freedom Project Education USA, FPEUSA.org. You can download them there. You just click on the Common Core button, and there's tons and tons of great stuff there, but these national sexuality standards are very easy to find. We'll be right back. Couple of minutes in this break, but don't worry, Duke is going to join me after the news break. He's in for the whole hour as well. And so everybody knows we are going to make sure that this podcast, we're going to put it on my page at WIBA.com so it doesn't disappear when the dates shift on the podcast page. And I'll make sure to get it up on social media. But it will take us a few hours to do that, so just bear with us. But please send it to your friends, your legislators. I heard your presentation at the We the People of the Republic event a couple of weeks ago when there was a big snowstorm. And I thought to myself as I was seeing it, and I've talked to you so many times, but I'd never actually seen your presentation. I thought nobody walks away from Duke Pesta's presentation on Common Core and cannot be racing to create a piece of legislation that eliminates this from Wisconsin schools.
The simple facts of what Common Core is are pretty shocking. The problem is that nobody knows them. And we've got situations where we've got legislators, I've talked to priests and bishops from the Catholic perspective, who don't want to hear because they don't want to then be accountable for the information.
You have to be, and I God bless the Madison Archdiocese, God bless Bishop Morlino, who came out, very soon. Let's see, Superior Diocese, Madison Diocese, Green Bay Diocese.
Every Wisconsin diocese except Milwaukee. And the Catholic parents in Milwaukee are just beside themselves. Because remember, Common Core is public schools, charter schools, voucher schools as well, Catholic schools as well. And welcome back to the program. Duke Pesta on the show. And we are out early today. Live broadcast is out early today for Badger hockey. So the affiliates are going to go to best of. That's why I wanted to bring Duke in the 4 o'clock hour on a Friday. Normally we kind of just shoot around a round table on a Friday.
Well, it's Duke Pesta. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's Duke Pesta. And we're getting to a point here in Wisconsin where we've got to make a decision on how to go forward on this because it is here. Common Core is the rule. Tony Evers is digging in. He's threatening to sue to keep these appalling things in our schools. And so what we're trying to do is to, as fast as we can, start really amping up people's knowledge base. Now, I've got Dave on the phone. Dave, you are from La Crosse.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hi to the folks in La Crosse and WLFN.
Yes.
Okay, and what can I do for you?
Well, I just wanted to say that we're encouraging as many people as we can through radio and other ways. Dr. Pesta is going to be our guest next Monday night, the 3rd, just Monday night. and he's going to be speaking to us, and we're looking forward to him very much, and hoping to get a whole
Okay, you got to tell me.
full.
You got to tell me what time, and you got to tell me where.
6:30 p.m. and at Lincoln Middle School.
All right, so in La Crosse at Lincoln Middle School, 6:30 this coming Monday.
Yes.
Duke Pesta is going to be talking about Common Core, and in the presentation that Duke does on Common Core, generally we're talking about. I mean, you can take any single topic from Common Core and turn it into a 6-hour conversation, but Duke does a presentation. Wholesale presentation on Common Core cannot be missed. You will understand it. You do a marvelous job of taking a very complicated piece of policy and turning it into bite-sized pieces. People, number one, can understand, and number two, now don't have an imagination that can maybe get in the way of the truth about this program. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Thank you for calling in and reminding us that this Monday at Lincoln Middle School in La Crosse, Duke will be there at 6:30 to talk about Common Core.
Suggest people maybe get there 20 minutes early because we're hoping for a packed house.
Good. Thanks, Dave. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, back to these. And you're also going to be, Brian and I are going to be at an event in Waukesha coming up on the 22nd. You're going to be there. I believe you've made over 65 different appearances and done this presentation over 65 times with Freedom Project Education. And so you are just all over the place.
That's just in Wisconsin. I've been to 25 states, talked to 14 different state legislatures, talked to about 22 bishops, over 60 priests across the country in the last 10 months on Common Core. So it's huge. And 10 months ago, Vicki, I didn't know what Common Core was. I found out with Freedom Project what it was. We educated ourselves, and we've been going nonstop since. And it's still staggering. And you must be pointed out, you are the only talk radio host in Wisconsin talking about this, and that includes all the conservatives. It shows you, after all this stuff that we've done, you've done, I've done on Common Core, every time I talk to a new audience, 90% of the people in the audience don't know what Common Core is. It's in our schools. It's a done deal in many respects, and yet nobody still knows what it is.
It's got to be unwound.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So it's here. I had somebody call up and say, well, if we pass. No. Tony Evers implemented it here. It is now the responsibility of the Wisconsin legislature to get rid of it.
Exactly.
Okay, and just looking at these sexuality standards and how they're folded in, we're not talking what Dr. James Milgram talked about with math standards not making kids college ready, or what Dr. Sandra Stotsky discussed and how English language arts devalues the pathways of critical thought via literature. We're not talking about the actual reduction of academic rigor that is attached to this. We're now talking about, we assume people understand that there's going to be less academic rigor, but now this is the socio-political construct of Common Core that we're discussing, and sexuality is key. Remember, this is folded into science class. It's folded into math class. So imagine a story problem, and it features a story of an alternative family. Maybe it's two dads, and maybe people are used to that right now, but maybe it's one dad and three moms, because we've now seen this sort of libertine promotion of polygamous families here. So if you're a Christian family, or you're a faith-based family, or you're just somebody who doesn't want some government telling you what your kid should know about sex and family, you need to work on this. It really is that key.
It's about preempting. One of the main aspects of Common Core is preempting the role of parents. The state, remember that, was it Hudson, Wisconsin, that little school district where kids were sent home with that assignment? Third graders, write an essay in which details how the state is just like the family, but better.
But better.
But better. That's right.
The state is just like the family, but better. That was an assignment in a Wisconsin school. All right? So let me ask you this. You have also information that this comprehensive sexuality core content and skills K-12. So it's called National Sexuality Education Standards Core Content and Skills K-12. How the teachers... there is actually an army of teachers that are going to be hired in order to both teach students and also teach teachers how to teach students how to view their own gender, how to view family, how to view morality without regard to the parents.
Yeah, the National Sexuality Standards, and in reading the title this time, you added the little catch, and skills. This is not just a curriculum. They are teaching your kids core content and sexuality skills. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. That you're sending your kids to school, and in math class, some of what they're going to be doing every day is learning sexuality skills. In English class, in particular, they're going to be learning skills. And all throughout the document, if you just take a second to read it, there are all sorts of assessment tools and arguments about what's going to happen. So in other words, that qualified sexuality teachers are required to teach these curriculums. So your teachers they're creating an army now of teachers who are going to be trained to make sexuality a part of every subject they teach. One of the provisos is that there must be multiple assessments and a variety of ways to assess children's success with the sexuality standards over and over again throughout.
Remember, in social studies and science and math and English. And that's the thing, is that so the teachers are going to be retrained in order to present this material. And again, we saw the response from the principal in Shawnee, Kansas, when challenged by a parent who objected. And it was basically nothing we can do about it. This is the national standard. The curriculum is part of it, aligns with national standards around these topics, and part of our curriculum in the school. By the way, on I believe it's page 6 of this document, the document flat out says this is about Common Core. So lest you think, well, they didn't say common in front of core content, or this principal said national standards, the document itself says this is about Common Core standards.
Allow me to read you a couple quotes taken directly from the document about how these standards will be administered. Quote, "Instruction by qualified sexuality education teachers is essential for student achievement," unquote. Quote, "Students need opportunities to engage in cooperative and active learning strategies with regard to the standards."
Whoa. Cooperative.
And active.
And active. So this is with other students. That's what that means.
Yep.
Cooperative and active with other students.
How about this? Quote, "Sufficient time must be allocated for students to practice skills relating to sexuality education."
What does that mean?
Well, it means that you're going to have to carve out time during the busy school day to go over and practice skills relating to these standards. How about this one? "Students need multiple opportunities and a variety of assessment strategies to determine their achievement of sexuality education standards and performance."
That's in the document that we're talking about here. That's a government document. It's not the analysis of FPE. It's the government itself.
Those were all direct quotes
from
the
way,
standards.
The federal government, not the governors of states, not state legislatures, this is the federal government. It's Department of Health and Human Services, and it's Department of Education. Health and Human Services. Obamacare is connected here. Certainly not explicitly, but implicitly, Obamacare is connected here because this is all about, part of Obamacare was all about promoting, quote, health standards in schools. So there is an Obamacare component. Brian.
What is it? Because this is so multi-layer. I mean, there's so much to this. And for folks who either haven't read a lot about it or, just getting exposure, what are the 2 or 3 takeaways that you say to people that say you can't sit this one out?
Well, with regards to the sexuality standards, I would say no subject is immune to them. So you think your kids, you can't opt out anymore. One of the great problems about having this administered ultimately at the federal level is, like, now you can go to your school district, you can go to your teacher and say, I don't want my kid reading that book, and you can excuse them. Now it's all geared to national tested standards, which means you can't opt out of it. And by the way, even if you wanted to avoid sex in the public schools, how do you do it? You'd have to avoid math class, English class, history class. That's a big one, number one. I think that right now in terms of the sexuality standards, and people, it is almost unfair to hit everybody over the last 9 months with how bad math and English are and what Common Core is. Now, but you've got to take that next step. We're just delving into the next layer. This is, I like what you said, Brian, there are tentacles here. This is all the stuff that's never going to be on the front page. It's never going to be voted on. It's never going to be laid out there as an official curriculum policy. It just now impacts the standards that we already have, that everybody has told us. DPI has told us, Tony Evers has told us, these are just math and English standards. And yet, we're already seeing how all these outside really destructive entities are feeding those standards. So this is the duplicity, but this is how deep we have to go to make everybody aware of what's at stake here.
Is part of this too kind of, I don't know if I should say walking people back, because, up till probably a couple of years ago or maybe 10 years ago, if somebody said, we need standards, we associate standards with something good.
Yeah, we do.
In our head. And so when we hear standards, we go, oh, standards, good. Somehow they're good. Is part of it walking people back from probably a bias that we all have in our head going, yeah, we need some standards to make sure these kids are getting it.
But it's that liberal false parallel that they do. If you don't support us entirely on a radical feminist agenda, you're waging war on women. There's the only if you don't support President Obama in the State of the Union, if you don't support Obamacare, you want people to die in the streets. It's the same thing here. I got news for you. By definition, education is standards. The idea that if we don't have Common Core, suddenly there are no standards in education is just absurd. Or the idea that there can't be better standards. But the way it's always framed is if you are opposed to Common Core, and this really hits Republicans hard. If you're opposed to Common Core, you don't want standards. Well, I'm a Republican. Of course I want standards. Hence, I must support Common Core, which is where you get the rhinos involved, right?
Well, and indeed, and I think there's there's an enormous knowledge gap among the elite pushing Common Core. Some of them are getting money from the consortia. Some of them are getting money from curriculum companies and testing companies.
Or the Gates Foundation.
Or the Gates Foundation or the Fordham Institute. So some of them are actually influenced by the money. Some of them, there's just a wildly enormous knowledge gap. For instance, I'll give you Mike Huckabee, social conservative. Does anybody disagree with me? He is an extremely committed social conservative. Would Mike Huckabee look at the national sexuality education standards and be comfortable and continue to promote Common Core? That suggests to me this is a guy who has been out there promoting this, telling you it's going to be okay, who doesn't know anything, or he's a liar about being a social conservative. You don't have to be a social conservative to object either. You just have to be a parent who wants to be able to decide for you and your kids what you want your kids to learn. And if you object, you want to be able to have your objections heard and respected. And again, here is already an explicit example in Kansas where a dad objected to a very offensive lesson for his daughter in 6th grade. And the spokesperson for the school said, the curriculum is part of an alliance with national standards around those topics, and it's part of our curriculum in the school district. Basically, get bent. It's kind of what she said, not our problem. So it's all that go take it to a different level is already been, expressed here.
Maybe getting bent is part of the standards for approved sexual contact,
I don't even
right?
want to know. You know what? This just
Would you like a job in the Middleton schools?
It has been a PG-13 show. We actually got very close to R in the first hour. But all right, we'll be right back and wrap this up. And I've got a couple of dates and a few locations where you can go see Duke Pesta. You should have come to see him in Madison. I know there was a huge snowstorm, but we'll bring him back. And welcome back. We've only got about a minute and a half here. I just want people to know, if you go to the website, F as in Frank, P as in Paul, E as in Eagle, USA.org, FPEUSA.org, you will find a list of where Duke is going to be presenting the entire Common Core presentation. So La Crosse on Monday, Waunakee is coming up, Waukesha, Portage, Eau Claire. You are all over the state of Wisconsin. I mean, it's almost every couple of days. And always adding more. So FPEUSA.org. And I'm going to put all this on social media. We'll get it up on our website as well at WIBA.com. I encourage you to share it with your friends. If you go to Duke's website, FPEUSA.org, there's a very bare bones Common Core video there that he had done about 8 months ago. We do encourage you to attend one of these presentations because there's a lot more than the video shows. And the national sexuality standards are there. You can learn lots more at that website, FPEUSA.org. I can't thank you enough. I mean, you are just tireless as a warrior on this issue.
Well, without you, the voice would be a lot smaller. So please keep doing what you're doing and get the word out.
Absolutely, no question. I appreciate it, Dr. Duke Pesta from Freedom Project Education. Also, he's been on the show before. You might remember his name from University of Wisconsin Oshkosh, but he's actually representing Freedom Project education today on the show. I'll be right back to wrap this up in just a second. Send you off to Badger Hockey.